One of the most enduring symbols of the First World War is that of the trenches, especially those on the Western Front, although there were trenches on all fronts. We did a special episode over a year ago about the trenches, how they were constructed, and what life was like in them. But since tomorrow is the centennial of the first day of the Battle of Verdun, where carnage on the Western Front is going to reach new levels, we're starting a new small series exploring the trenches from a different perspective. Today, I'm talking about trench warfare and close quarters combat. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode about trench warfare in World War I. The stalemate of trench warfare began in the fall of 1914 on the Western Front, after the German advance was halted at the Battle of the Marne, and the race to the sea ended the last chance for the two sides to outflank each other. The stopping power of the machine gun had made unsupported infantry and cavalry charges obsolete, and a man in a hole in the ground was about as safe as you could get in modern war, although trenches and foxholes had been a part of warfare since the first use of ranged weapons. But the war would not be won until the stalemate was broken, until someone broke through the trenches. And even though most deaths occurred in the slaughterhouse of no man's land, there were battles throughout the war that hinted that it was indeed possible to break the enemy's trench system. At Neuve-Chapelle, early in 1915, the British broke through to the German trench lines, where guns were fired at point-blank range, where soldiers hacked at each other with bayonets, sharpened spades, knives, clubs, anything.
Great Scott, it's the secret German TV set of World War I, and it's still operational. And who is that Indy Nidell?
It is indeed Indy Nidell. This is a very unexpected surprise. And thanks to German engineering, that TV set not only still works, it's apparently two ways. I'm not interrupting anything, am I?
No, not at all, Indy. Actually, we were just talking about some of the application of some of these World War I melee weapons, like this American trench knife.
And this Austrian Feldspaten. Indy, you talk about these sort of things all the time, don't you?
I do, and actually today, of all days, I'm talking about trench assault tactics, so that's quite a coincidence. Hey, I'll tell you what, when you guys are done, why don't you send your fans over to us to check us out, and when I'm done, I'll send our fans over to you guys to check you guys out.
I think that's a great idea, Indy. We'll definitely send our viewers over to check out the Great War. But for now, we need to get back to this, and we'll leave you to your video.
Greetings to Berlin from Arizona.
Greetings to Arizona from Berlin. Yeah, I'll see you around. Okay, Neuve-Chapelle, where the carnage was going strong in the German trenches and where hand grenades killed both friend and foe. Many of the officers were killed in the attack, and green NCOs who knew nothing of close combat had to lead the remnants of their nervous and exhausted troops through an unknown trench system. Confusion, terror, and hesitation reigned as the German counteroffensive began. Thing is, nobody really knew what to do. The British further back didn't know if the advanced troops were alive or if they'd taken the trenches. They didn't know how many reserves to send and where to send them. Artillery wasn't going to be much help without communication with the attacking soldiers. It was clear that close combat in the trenches needed to be studied. And think of the conditions. The modern battlefield was loud. Men had to scream into each other's ears over the incessant gunfire and explosions. Bodies were mutilated, limbs were torn off. It was combat on a scale of carnage that the world had never seen before. And much as the machine gun was the symbol of death in no man's land, the hand grenade would become the symbol of death in the trenches. It could kill and wound whole groups of enemies at once, and with a range of only 40 meters or so, the hand grenade was especially deadly in the close combat scenarios of trench warfare. The British Expeditionary Force had around 40 hand grenades a week at their disposal in 1914. By 1916, they would have 800,000 Mills bombs weekly. Lieutenant Walter Ambroselli describes in his diary how a well-placed grenade could massacre whole squads. As we forced our way through the deep, narrow trench, what a horrible sight met our eyes. On the top, a corpse without a head or a torso, and underneath, some who were still alive, though with limbs torn off or horribly mutilated. They looked at us with bleeding, mournful eyes. The crying and moaning of these poor, doomed enemy soldiers went to our hearts. We couldn't get out of the trench to avoid this pile of bodies. However much our hearts shrank from trampling over them with our hobnailed boots, we were forced to do it. You might try trickery to gain an advantage. At Gommencourt in 1915, the Germans evacuated their first line of trenches, and when the British entered the trenches, German artillery cut them off from reinforcements, leading to a bloody trench battle between the German 2nd Garde Reserves and the Queen Victoria Fusiliers, Scots Guards, and Westminster Fusiliers. The fighting ended when the British had used all available ammunition and grenades, including that taken from dead friend and foe, and the order was given to retreat. Of the 856 British soldiers who had attacked, only 266, many seriously wounded, made it back to the shell holes of no man's land. By mid-1915, close-quarter aggression was now, as Tony Ashworth wrote, an integral part of the trench war technology, of which the skills and rationale were taught at high command schools and published in official texts. A trench raid was now a complex tactic that needed the coordination of different weapons specialists who could perform trench warfare on a professional level. Initially, there were improvised training groups, usually volunteers, but as raiding tactics proved successful against enemy trench systems, the groups themselves became more and more specialized. Raiders were now hand-picked and were given special privileges like better rations or more days off because of the dangers they faced. The Canadians, as an example, put together their raiding troops in different sections, like assault teams, trench mortar teams, and so on to maximize their effectiveness. The aim of the raiding group was to inflict the maximum amount of damage in a short amount of time, mostly only minutes. They would sneak up, usually at night, kill the sentries if possible, and then attack the enemy position with a flurry of grenades. The surprise attack would shatter the enemy into confusion. But it was the Germans who were the first to give their raiding parties an overall tactic and organization. They called it Sturmkompanie, or Sturmtroops. These were the storm troops. Now, we'll talk about them and the development in equipment and tactics in the second part of this small special series. But in short, hand-picked soldiers from different weapon groups would join together to form small attack teams. These teams would undergo special small group tactics training and exercises behind the front lines. Like the raiding groups, their job was to invade the enemy trench, do as much damage, and collect as much information and prisoners as possible, and get out again. They were specialized in trench combat, and more often than not, that meant fighting with clubs, small arms, or bayonets, and of course, the hand grenade and rifle grenade, which they carried in large numbers. The first attackers were into the trench long before the mist lifted. In a moment, we were all mixed up in hand-to-hand fighting. I had two men coming at me with their bayonets, one of whom I think I shot with my revolver, while a sergeant standing just behind me shot the other at point-blank range with his rifle barrel over my shoulder. But almost at the same second, a German stick bomb came whistling into the trench from the parapet, right into the bunch of us, and killed or wounded practically the whole of us, English and German alike. Before they attacked again, they brought up some trench mortars and knocked 7 bells out of us, then swarmed into the trench. By that time, there were only a handful of us left on our feet, and all, I suppose, wounded. I got another wound from a stick bomb, which put a bit of metal into my thigh. Before I collapsed, I tried to give the surrender signal and hope I succeeded, thereby in saving a few lives. We had done our best. Captain Charles Miller. And as the war progressed, the raiding groups on all sides became more and more effective, which meant more and more deadly. Some saw raiding troops as elite groups embracing the reality of combat. Others saw them as inhuman monsters. Others still as heroes. Ernst Junger wrote, "One hears so often the mistaken view that the infantry combat has sunk to an uninteresting mass slaughter. On the contrary, wars are decided by the individual. The princes of the trench, with their hard, determined faces, foolhardy, so sinewy, supple, jumping back and forth, with sharp, bloodthirsty eyes, heroes who recalled no report. The trench battle is the bloodiest, fiercest, most brutal of all, but it also has its men who had grown in this hour to unknown, swashbuckling fighters, since there is no turning back and no mercy." Maybe they were all three, just men doing their job, monsters, and heroes. I certainly can't say, since neither I nor you have lived through the nightmare of trench warfare, either as an attacker, raining death down upon a hopefully unsuspecting enemy, or in your own trench, as death came to you and your comrades and friends. And as death came, as your death came, perhaps you saw your side counterattacking and driving the enemy from your trenches. And your final thought was that dozens of men had died on both sides, but nobody on either side had gained an inch of territory. This was, as I said, just the first part of a small series where we explore the trenches and trench warfare a bit more than we do in our regular episodes. You can click right here to check out Ian and Carl over at In Range TV. Now, they just published a first video about World War I melee weapons that were used in the trenches, and they generally explore historic and current firearms and equipment on their show. Tell us what you think about this episode and about what other specials you would like to see. And if you want to help out with the research, get in contact with Flo on Facebook or on our official website. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.